Hi, and welcome to Wednesday Workshops. It's organized by the Lake Union Conference. I'm your host, Andy M., Communication Director for the Michigan Conference. I want to thank you for joining us for the first of 6 workshops that will be hosted by one of my communication colleagues in the Lake Union. These training sessions are really geared towards anyone who wants to hone their communication skills. And today's program is on video and photography. You know, God gave us eyes for a reason, really to observe and receive information and to have it register in our brains. And it's clear we're visual beings. Eye-catching visuals captivate and provide a better understanding of the message, which can be explained easier, faster, and clearer than just a cluster of written words. And today we'll introduce you to the best practices of visual communication for your church or ministry. We'll show you how you can captivate your audience with impactful messages through photo and video. So let me just go ahead and start by introducing you to Mark Paden. He's a former vice president of communication for GYC, the youth movement. He's a filmmaker, an advertiser, working with ministries and organizations ranging from the General Conference on down to local conferences. And today, of course, he's assisting with this Lake Union initiative. He also advertises for various businesses, specializes in crafting content that isn't just beautiful, but also highly effective for accomplishing online objectives. And what I personally appreciate about Mark, I've known him for a few years, is his dedication to ministry and the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He also has a passion for visually illustrating God's creation, both on land and underwater. And of course, you can reach him at the handles that will be listed on screen. So at this time, I'm going to turn the time over to Mark, and we'll have some time afterwards for some questions and answers.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so very much, Andy. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. It is great to be on here. I really love video, and yeah, I've known Andy for a number of years now, and it's always a pleasure. Yeah, so really what I wanted to dive in today in looking at the idea of photo and video, there's a lot in here, and there's a lot of ways that, well, there's simply a lot of potential for it. Just to give it a little bit of an illustration, over the last few weeks, I guess it was in the last month, there was a video that blew up online. It was this guy, his username was 420 Dogface. And he's this, middle-aged guy, and he was on a skateboard riding down the road, just kind of looking out, just chilling out, that kind of thing, as he's drinking a bottle of Ocean Spray cranberry juice. And in the background, the song is playing Dreams by Fleetwood Mac. And as he's sitting there just drinking this, he's kind of lip syncing to the words, just looks like he's totally chilled out. That video, within a few days, got millions of views. I think at this point, just on TikTok alone, it's in the over 50, 60 million views. And that's just on TikTok, not counting Instagram and all the other platforms it's on. Well, after that, the drummer from Fleetwood Mac decided that he would copy the video. And he did the same thing. He's singing along, drinking Capri Sun as he's just chilling, as he's riding down the road. And it became this huge internet thing over the course of just a couple weeks. And you think about how much effort went into that video. Next to nothing. I mean, he's just riding down on a skateboard drinking cranberry juice. Like, that's not hard to do. And yet it was able to kick off an incredible movement of people following the same example. I mean, even to the point where not Capri Sun, but Ocean Spray, they gave the guy a free truck because his truck broke down, and that's why he was riding the skateboard, right? So it really took off. And the reason that I mention this is just to illustrate simply how powerful social media can be, simply how powerful these mediums can be if we use them right. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, is to really get into how do you go about creating content online. Obviously, right now, in the middle of this pandemic, it's a lot harder to do stuff in person. We really had to shift a lot of the ways that we do things from in person to online. And in this transition, it's tricky because how the online world works is fundamentally different than how in-person churches work. And on top of that, we know that we want to reach people online. I mean, there's something like over 4 billion people who have access to the internet. 1.5 billion, at least that was how it was a couple of years ago, 1.5 billion people on Facebook alone. So you start looking at those kinds of numbers and realize that there's a tremendous opportunity for reaching people through these mediums. But then the question is, how do you do it? It's complicated, right? There's a lot of different things going on that make it a little bit more tricky to do. So what are the best practices? How can you get online, create content that is not only visually appealing, but also effective? Something that is going to reach people and make a difference in their lives and hopefully get them to change something about how they're living. So that's what we want to talk about today. How do you get to that point? And the first thing that I want to bring up is that we tend to have a little bit of a complex when it comes to Christian content. We sometimes feel that, all that people want to watch is, videos of girls dancing and, stupid stuff or whatever else that, we can't do as Christians. And I want to point out that I think we need to rephrase how we look at that. First of all, because the most impactful message that has ever been heard in the world has been the gospel. I mean, you had a few first century Christians who were able to turn the world upside down with a message, and they didn't have all these tools that we have access to now. And they were able to take something because the gospel fundamentally is so powerful that if we present it correctly and use the tools correctly, it can get views. And not just views, but it can get widely spread to the point where it impacts people's lives. That's really what we're after here. But also to illustrate this, to even see this in a modern context, some of you might be familiar with a series that was recently done by a Mormon group called The Chosen. It's essentially a TV series of the life of Christ, but they tell it in a really unique way. Well, the incredible thing is it's become the most well-funded crowdsourced media project in history. Something at this point like $20 million have been raised, crowdsourced specifically for this project, which that's a lot in crowdsourcing. So this shows that there is a market. There are people out there who want to hear this sort of thing, right? They want to hear the message of the gospel. And even people who don't necessarily know that they want to hear the message of the gospel, there are some really powerful ways of getting into those people's lives and presenting messages to them. So this is the first thing that I really want to point out, is that I suggest that instead of looking at media as, filming some videos and putting them online, we really need to look at it as marketers. We really need to look at it as if we are advertising something, because how we get people online to watch our content and impact them is the same way that I will get somebody to buy a product that I'm advertising. It follows the same rules. And if we can learn those rules, and if we can use those effectively, then we can reach people effectively for Christ. Make sense? So the first thing that I want to put out here is that we have 5 basic goals whenever we're creating a piece of content. Whenever we are sitting down and crafting a video, we need to think of 5 fundamental goals. The first one is we want people to click on the video, right? As somebody is scrolling through Facebook, we need them to click on the video. The second thing that we need them to do is watch the video all the way through. Then we want them to change something about how they think or live their life based on that video. Then we want them to share the video. And then we want them to be impacted by it, right? So let's start at this first one. How do we get people to click on a video? This is one of the fundamental differences between online and in a church. The reason that people come to church is very different than the reason that people will come to or click on a piece of content, watch something online. You think when somebody is coming to church, their whole thing is they either have a commitment to come to church because, they're Christian, they love God. There's a social element. People want to go to church because, their friends are there, etc. And the potlucks, these are the reasons that people will come to an in-person church service. You almost never have somebody coming to church, except maybe for a prophecy series, where they're coming specifically because of what you're saying in the sermon. That's very rare. Whereas online, everything is about what you're saying in the video. People will click on something or not click on something simply based on what you're saying in it and how you tell them about what you're saying. So the first rule that we really need to get into is that content is everything. It's not enough to simply live stream a sermon and give the day's date of the sermon or where the sermon is being preached. Those things really won't get anybody to click on it except people who are already invested in going to that church service, right? So if we want to get people to start actually wanting to click on that live stream, saying, your church, this date, divine service, it's just not going to work. You'll get a few, but it's just not going to be as effective as it could. So how do we actually do that? So this is the first thing that we need to talk about is content. Content is crucial. And being specific on your content to make sure that people will actually benefit from it. So the question is, how do you do that? Now, I'm an artist, but I also like to think about things in a very analytical, almost scientific way, if you will. Specifically because if you have strategies and structures, you can create something a lot more efficiently and effective because you know when you've hit it, right? So the first thing that I like to do is think of two main principles. The first thing is that the content should either hit a pain point, solve somebody's problem, or fulfill a desire. These are the two fundamental rules of getting people's attention with anything. And I'm not just talking about like the itching ears types of desires, but we'll get to that in a second. But these are the two fundamental things that we need to think about: solving people's problems and fulfilling desires, right? Really burn those into your heads before you ever create a piece of content. And I would even suggest, if you're a pastor or something like this, don't get up and do a sermon unless you are solving a problem or fulfilling a desire. And again, I don't mean in the itching ears type of way. But think about the power of this. I do a lot of marketing. And I was just creating an ad for a group that makes a plant-based protein shake. Well, the first thing that we started to do is analyze what pain points this product is solving. What are the specific things that are causing people to purchase this product, right? So one of the big ones is that a lot of plant-based protein powders taste really gross. So this is something that they really worked on. So that's a pain point. Another pain point was a lot of the other protein shakes will come in big plastic tubs. And a lot of people who are plant-based are also doing that for, basically to keep the planet safe, right? So they don't want to use all that plastic. So they made a bag that uses a lot less plastic. So these are two pain points that we have immediately. And they also have some crossover and desire, right? People are looking for these types of products that solve these problems. And so in our videos, what we did is we talked about how this product solved those problems. And we first did it by talking about the problem itself and putting a finger on the pain, if you will. And once we establish that, that gets people's attention. So now let's think about this in the Christian context. If you're wanting to put up a piece of content, what are the pain points people are going through? Think about that. In a global pandemic, what are people in pain over? Maybe it's they don't have, maybe they're lonely, they're not around people and they're really struggling because of that. Maybe another pain point is financial, and those are just specific to the pandemic. Look at how many pain points the Bible talks about. I mean, fundamentally, sin causes death, sin causes pain, and the gospel is there to relieve that pain. So we have so many antidotes to pain in the Bible that we can start talking about. So when you first start looking at, okay, what content am I going to produce? Start with thinking about that. Start with thinking about what are the pain points that we can address, right? And before I get to the desire point, a question just came in. What is the ideal length or time frame for video content? This is really an interesting question because it varies quite dramatically between what platform you're on. Okay, so one of the platforms that I would highly encourage people to get on and use for ministry is TikTok. There's actually a surprisingly large Christian group on TikTok that you can really do a lot with. You can reach them. So on there, you're talking about 16 seconds to a minute, or even as little as 5 seconds to a minute, but nothing over a minute. If you're talking Facebook, you can get away with live streams. Facebook really likes live, but also things in the anywhere from 3 to 15 minute range is generally good across all platforms. But when you get to YouTube specifically, this is where you really want to have in the 10 to 17 minute range. So the rationale behind that is that YouTube prioritizes view time. So basically, the way that videos rank on YouTube, I'll just explain this quickly, is that if YouTube sees a video and sees a lot of engagement on it, people are really liking it, people are listening to a lot of the video, that means that they know the video is good. If the video is good, they know other people will like it. So what they start to do in the algorithm is push that video out to more and more people. So, and the more people who watch it, who watch a lot of it, then they realize, okay, this is something that people are really watching, and so they'll recommend it to more and more people. So on YouTube, a really good strategy is to create longer content. Not too long. Once you kind of pass the 20-minute mark, you start getting into the area where people won't click on it because they think they just don't have enough time to watch it. So something in the 10 to 17 or 18 minute range is a really ideal range right now on YouTube. So yeah, great question. Hope that answered that. But yeah, let's get back to the content thing. So you first have the pain points. You also have the desire points. And it is really important here to recognize that we're not just saying, or I'm definitely not advocating to just itch people's ears and give them all the things that they want to hear. But people do have desires. The Bible says that God will give us the desires of our heart, right? So that there are healthy, beautiful desires that God has given us that we can talk to. One of those desires is music. God has given us a desire to hear beautiful sounds, and that's an incredible gift from Him. So we can work on that. Can we create music that's really beautiful that people want to hear? And we have several examples of notable Adventists who have done fairly well on YouTube through music. So think about that first, your pain points and your desire points. And here's the other thing too, just because you're talking to pain points and desire points doesn't mean that you can't say things that are hard for people to hear, right? Because oftentimes the antidote to our pain is sometimes something that we don't want to hear, right? But as long as it's real, as long as it works, right? As long as it's something that is really effective, then it works, right? So start when you're thinking about your content, start by creating content that is hitting people's pain points, hitting people's desire points. And if you do that, you're going to be really good. But then that gets into the next thing, is that how do you get people to actually click on the video? And this is the other difference between something in like a sermon in a church versus a piece of online content. And to illustrate this, I want you to think about the difference between the title of videos on YouTube versus the title of films that you will see on, like, a trailer or something like this, right? Film titles tend to be a little bit more poetic, if you will. They're a little bit more, they're meant to be interesting, but not necessarily grabbing, right? So you think of, I don't know, The Sound of Music. That's not really grabbing you. A film works by getting your attention through other things. They play you a trailer or they show you a movie poster. That's how they get your attention. Whereas on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, etc., well, especially YouTube and Facebook, people will click on something based on the title of it. So you really have to work to get their attention through that title. This is why you'll see a lot of clickbait, for instance, on YouTube. It's just really effective. Now, you don't have to be clickbaity, but you do need to use good practices when it comes to titling your project. Now, this is one thing that I would recommend in sermons. Don't use film types of titles in your sermons or any of your online content. It doesn't matter if it's a live stream or a TikTok or YouTube, whatever it is. Don't use a film style title because those do not work very well. It can sometimes work in spite of it, but it's not ideal to do that. So when it comes to your content, make sure that, or to your title rather, make sure that your title reflects the content. Make sure that it brings up a key pain point a key pain point from the content. And this is the other thing too. You can use your pain points, your desire points, also curiosity and pattern disrupts. So curiosity and pattern disrupts are very powerful ways of grabbing people's attention. So humans operate on what's called the gap theory. If you leave a critical piece of information out, that creates a curiosity in us that demands that we click on it. This is why, like I think I clicked on a video yesterday that had an F3, it said something like an F350 pulling a Toyota Tundra TRD out of the mud. Well, I wanted to see what happened. I was curious. And so even though it's like, it's not necessarily doing anything for me, like I'm sure they just got him out, you're curious about how it happened, right? You're curious, wait, which one was stronger? Was the Ford strong enough to do this? So using that curiosity. The other really powerful one is pattern disrupt, saying something that people are not expecting to hear. So I'm going to show you guys a video in a minute that I made that's the title of it was put on Facebook, so the title is slightly different, but a good title would be something along the lines of, you like fish poop and didn't know it. You don't like fish poop, right? So it disrupts things. You're not used to thinking of fish poop in a positive way. So when you hear that, it disrupts a pattern, and now that engages that curiosity. Now, if you can bring like a pattern disrupt with a pain point, that's when it gets really powerful, or curiosity with desire or something like that. Just got a question. What do you think of reusing content across platforms? Example, using TikTok videos and putting it on Instagram Reel. Yes, I love it. So TikTok and Instagram Reels are essentially the same platform, just with different algorithms and of course different apps. So those you can use across the different platforms very effectively. There's some that it's a lot less efficient to do, and you really need to re-edit. So for instance, if you're doing a Instagram page story, like you're just putting or not a story, but an Instagram post, then you can use that on Facebook. But remember, that's usually only a minute long, although you can do their new TV thing too. Well, I guess it's not that new, it's been out a couple of years. But on some of those platforms like YouTube and Facebook share content fairly easily. Instagram, it gets a little bit tricky, especially if you're just doing it as a post. And if you're doing it as a story, then it's also very different. The best thing that I would recommend here is you really need to understand the application before starting to upload content to it. So whenever you are trying to come up with content or thinking about your strategy, make sure that you are thinking about what that platform is and know that platform. So spend a lot of time on TikTok before you start uploading to TikTok. Now, set some boundaries because that algorithm is crack cocaine, but spend some time on it. See what people are doing and what works. Do some research to figure out what that specific platform is good for, because I can kind of share some things like that, but it's really best if you start to know that platform for yourself. But yeah, great question. And then we'll have some other questions here in a bit, but we'll save that for Q&A time. So pretty much what we've talked about right now is the reason why we should do stuff online, and the bit about content and your 5 goals, right? If I can stress one thing more than anything else, is that content is the most important thing. Don't think that just because you can say it, that it will be effective. it's very tempting to just, put up a sermon that you preach or something like this, but really think about the fact that the online world is incredibly competitive for people's attention span. If your piece of content doesn't grab their attention and doesn't keep their attention, there's a million other things that they can watch instantly that's going to be a lot more pleasing for them. So really make sure that your content is good. Now, we're talking about the 5 goals, right? So the first one being you want people to actually click on your video. Then you want them to watch it all the way through. So when it comes to watching all the way through, this is where your story structure comes in incredibly handy. You want to make sure that you start the video with a question in people's minds. At the very outset of the video, you want them to be wondering something that is making them curious. Because here's the thing, as soon as somebody is no longer curious about what you're going to say, you've lost them. This is literally the most important point I can make in this whole thing. As soon as somebody is no longer curious about what you're going to say, you've lost them. Now, I sometimes like to think about this when it comes to sermons and preaching in a church. Obviously, there are some people that just aren't going to be interested and they're going to zone out, whatever. But oftentimes, I really feel like a large part of the reason that people zone out in sermons is that they lose curiosity in what you're going to say next. And if you've done it really well and they still lose curiosity, well, that's on them. But if we don't do it well, if we don't keep them wondering what's going to happen next and what's going to happen at the end, it's just kind of natural human psychology. I mean, I love listening to sermons. I love hearing things about God, but even I'll zone out on sermons that don't do that very well. And it's just a fundamental part of how we as human beings are wired psychologically. So it's really important, especially on your online content, to make sure that you are always keeping in people's minds what's going to happen next and what's going to happen at the end. Those two things are absolutely crucial to keep in mind when you're creating any piece of content. And I keep saying that because I want it to stick in your heads, right? Keep people wondering what's going to happen next and what's going to happen at the end. What's an example of this? So you think about a story. Okay, let's take the example of people who are lonely during the pandemic. So we've solidified on our content. We're going to talk about loneliness, the pain point of loneliness. So first of all, we start thinking about this. Okay, how do we solve this problem? Well, first of all, let's talk about the problem. People are lonely because they can't get outside. So you start off your content by saying, it's lonely. During COVID, it's lonely. You're stuck inside. You can't go to church. You can't do these things. How do you deal with this? How can we as Christians not be eaten up by this depressing, crushing loneliness when we can't go outside, when we can't do the things that we're used to? What does God have to say about this? And what are some ways that we as church members can get together and strengthen each other so that we don't have that kind of loneliness, right? So what I've done there is I've set the whole thing up. I've introduced the pain point and I've set up and made you curious about what I'm gonna say next. Now, maybe that pain point isn't the strongest for you particularly or whatever else, but at least there you have the setup. Now for the rest of the piece of content, I need to be talking about the answers to that specific pain point. So as you are going through this thing, as you are listening, you are going to be wondering, okay, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? So build your content like that. Explain that pain point, explain how to overcome that, explain how to, whatever you're going to say about it. And then once you have fully answered it, end the video. Don't switch to another subject. Don't go to something else in the video. And this is one of the biggest things is I know rabbit holes can be incredibly fun, but rabbit holes are incredibly damaging to people's desire to listen all the way through to the end. Because what I see happening a lot of times when people structure their content that doesn't work, it kind of happens like this. We know there's some points that we want to make. We know there are some ideas that we want to share. And so we get on, we start talking, we make this point, and then we make that point, and then we make this point, and then we make that point. And there's really no clear direction. There's no story structure. So this is one of the most effective ways at keeping people engaged. We talked a minute ago about ideal length of video. At this point, you can make your video very long if you're keeping the good story structure together. If the story structure is not there, it doesn't matter how long it is, people aren't going to watch it, right? So really make sure that your story structure is good. And if you want a little bit more on this, look up the classic story arc. You know, you have your setup, your inciting incident, your rising action, your climax, your falling action, and your resolution. Look that up. Really study into that and make sure that all of your content is in that structure. And let me just, a little bit of an aside here. When you're preaching a sermon, try to incorporate that too. Or if you're a pastor or whatever you're doing, if you ever have the chance to get up front and talk to people, try structuring your sermons in that. Setup, inciting incident, rising action, climax, falling action, completion, or whatever the other term I said a second ago. Make sure that your content is in that format because you will keep people's attention so much better. So we've gone with the first one of grabbing people's attention, then keeping people's attention. Now we want them to change something as a result of this, right? So, and this just comes down to being really effective, making sure that content is going to change their lives in a certain way and presenting it really effectively, making your arguments really strong. Now, this one isn't as big of a deal because we tend to do that pretty well, right? So make sure that your arguments are really strong and that they are actually effective and are directional so that people can take actionable steps on them, right? The next thing that we want people to do is we want them to share this content. Sharing is incredibly important. And in fact, there's a book out there called, I forget the name of the book, but the guy who wrote it has a company called Shareability. And essentially his whole point of his business and the whole point of his book is that if you make your videos shareable, you will get people's attention. Because think about it. When you're sharing a piece of content, if you share a piece of content to me, I'm much more likely to click on it than if I scroll through it on Facebook or, you know, just watch it on YouTube or something. Somebody sending you a video, you're much more likely to be interested in it. And it also says that that video did something for the person who shared it. So if that piece of content did something for that person who shared it, they're more likely to pass it on. So how do you make something shareable? One of the best ways to do this is make them feel something as a result of it, or provide them a lot of value that is really going to change their lives. So if we're talking about loneliness, a really effective strategy here, have something that really helps people overcome loneliness. Have some really good content, some really good strategies, some really beautiful verses that really hit home with how this is, and make it actionable, something that people can do, something that people will feel like will actually change how they can do things to solve the problem. The other way is make them feel something really deeply. Like, you know, this is why we share stories of like the soldier who came home and surprised his daughter or his son. It's a really feel-good story. It's beautiful. It has this profound sense of emotion to it that when we see that, we want to share it. We want to share that feeling with other people. And also, ironically enough, we kind of share things somewhat selfishly, because when we share something, we're saying something about us. So you think about if you're wearing a shirt, a lot of us wear shirts with brands on them, right? I have one shirt in particular, well, it's actually a wetsuit that has a big logo right on the chest of it. And I love it. I'll post pictures to Instagram with it and everything else because it's super cool, right? Now, how does a brand get you to give them free advertising, right? How do you do that? Well, you're not sharing because you, out of the goodness of your heart, want to give them free advertising. You're sharing it because you're saying something about you. When you share something, when you put a logo on your body, when you tell somebody that somebody else did, what you're really doing is you're identifying with that thing. So when I wear that wetsuit, they've done a really good job on the brand. A lot of really elite shark divers and free divers and scuba divers and underwater filmmakers wear that wetsuit. So when I am wearing that, in a way, I'm almost identifying myself as part of that group, right? And this is why we share things. This is why we wear logos. So think about that when you're creating your video. What will people think? How are people identifying with this piece of content in order for them to share it? Like, what are they saying about themselves? That they're somebody who really values the gospel, for instance. If you do a video that really speaks powerfully to the beauty of the gospel, people who are really invested in the gospel, who really love the gospel, they're going to share that. So think about that. You really want people to share your content. And if that's a little bit confusing, I know that's a lot of information right there. Feel free to ask more questions if that wasn't totally clarified. Yeah, so those are your basic goals: to make sure that people click on the content, that they watch it all the way through, that they do something different as a result of it, and that they share it. Yeah, so these are the really important things. So we've talked about that. Then let's talk about actually how you get the content out there. The nice thing is that most platforms have a really effective algorithm. If you create a piece of content that people are going to want to watch, that follows those rules and that follows the dynamics of a particular platform, it doesn't matter what platform you're on, you can be effective on it. As long as you follow those rules, you can be effective on it. Specifically because they will automatically take that content and boost it. So what you want to do is, once you've created your piece of content or your pieces of content and you put them online, be strategic in how you share them. So think about people who know a lot of people who like to share content, people who are in the target market, so to speak, of whatever that piece of content is, and strategically share it to them. And that will start the buzz going. That will start getting people to watch it. And as that happens, all these different algorithms will start pushing the video out to other people. Do they like this? And based on the reaction from those people, they'll either rank it higher or rank it lower. So start with that. It's really not that tough. Even if you don't have a large network of people that you can share it out to, TikTok, for instance, is phenomenal at this, at taking people who just upload some content that people really like and really getting them big. And they had no network before then. So you can be very effective without a lot of complex marketing strategies. Now, one thing I would recommend is, whenever you're looking into a specific platform, look up best practices, like on YouTube, for instance, how you can get more views by making it similar, make it a related video to other videos. So there's different strategies and things that you can do to make it boosted even a little bit more, but focus on the content, focus on those key goals, and then go from there. Let's talk a little bit about aesthetics. I have intentionally not dwelt a lot on aesthetics so far and equipment, specifically because as a filmmaker, I get a lot of questions regarding equipment. What gear should I get? What camera should I get? What editing software? What lights? And I'm a total gear nerd. I own a really nice camera, a Red, for those of you who are familiar with that. I love gear. It's pretty. I love it. But I also recognize that all of the technical fits in this little box over here. It doesn't matter how beautiful your video is. If nobody wants to watch it, nobody's going to know if it's beautiful. First, start on making sure that people want to watch it, making content that is going to be engaging and effective. And once you've done that, then you can start moving over here and worrying about making it beautiful. But at the beginning, I mean, I'm talking out of two sides of my mouth here, because I have, on the one hand, I have a really big burden that our work as Adventists and as Christians needs to be beautiful. It needs to be something that represents the majesty and perfection of Almighty God. At the same time, I also recognize that function really has to be prioritized over form at the beginning. So I really want to encourage you, start with the content, start with making sure that people want to watch it, and then you can start moving into the aesthetic. But what are some basic things that you can do? The first most important thing is make sure that your lighting is good. Bad lighting on a face it's just harder for people to see it. So for instance, I'll just show you really quick what I'm using right now. You don't have to use this, but I have this big old light there on a soft box right in front of me. And that's giving a nice light on my face. You can see some shadow actually over here. It's just giving dimension to my face. You can see my eyes. It helps to connect with the person. But you don't even need a light like that. Like for instance, this window right here, if I were sitting in this direction and placing the camera over here, I would still get the same type of lighting on my face. So do something where the lighting is going to be decent. The other thing is when it comes, or the other really important thing is audio, making sure that your audio is good. Making sure that it's something that will be very clearly understood. Because remember, all of this boils down to content. If people can't understand your content, they won't watch it. So really at the beginning, prioritize making sure that your content is readily understandable. Everything needs to reinforce the function of the content, and everything needs to reinforce the content and the structure of that content. But making sure that it's beautiful is also really good, but don't sacrifice content to make it beautiful. I've seen so many videos that are pretty. They have the drones, they have the gimbals, they have the coolest 4K camera, but nobody watches it. Doesn't matter how pretty it is. You get my point. So what I want to do really quick before we go to the Q&A is I want to share a video that I did, and this was kind of the one that I teased out a little bit before, but I just want to share an example of how you can put a piece of content together. So this was for the Geoscience Research Institute for their Creation Sabbath initiative. And basically what we did is we wanted to design an advertising strategy that would get people invested in the brand before we gave a friction ask, basically asked them to do something for the brand, right? In this case, be a part of Creation Sabbath. So what we started out by doing is creating a series of minute-long documentaries that were basically what we call value videos, value ads, things that people just want to watch and share and are interested in. So we were using all of these same concepts that I've been talking about today. So one of these videos was the story about fish pooping. So I'm going to share the video really quick, and then I will, I'll share the video really quick, and then I will kind of break down a little bit of, a little bit more of how specifically it, how it meets the goals. I'm just going to share my screen here really quick and make sure it's on the right tab. Okay, come over here. So there are several different videos, as you can see. And if you're interested in watching more of these in better quality, you can go to my website, just markapaden.com right there. So let's click on this video and hope it loads.
We all love the white sandy beaches of the tropics, but do you know how they're formed? Meet the parrotfish. These residents of the tropical seas are the architects of their beautiful shores. How do they do it? The answer might just surprise you. Parrotfish have a unique diet. They use bill-like beaks to break off and feed on the hard coral around them. As they chew it up, the hard white calcium carbonate is turned into tiny, finely ground particles of sand. Then there's just one way to get it out. Yep, you guessed it, pooping. That's right, those picturesque white sandy beaches are simply fish poop. But no need to worry, by the time you lounge on the soft sand, it's completely harmless. The parrotfish is yet another incredible example of God's ingenuity in creation.
And then you see the brand. So the really important things here, notice the structure of it. First of all, we get your attention with saying, you know, you actually like fish poop and didn't know it. Then, so that gets your attention. You click on the video. Then the first thing you see is, how are these white sandy beaches made? And And then that starts the curiosity. Okay, well, how are these made? And what is this relation to fish poop? And then we start setting up the story. We have that rise in action where you then hear about how these things are actually, or these fish and what they do. And then you get to the punchline, the climax, where it's like, yep, you guessed it, fish poop. These white sandy beaches are all fish poop, right? And then it's just kind of blowing your mind a little bit because you don't think paradise, white sandy beaches, and fish poop in the same sentence, right? And this kind of video, it's shareable. It makes you laugh a little bit. And we got some really good data based off of this. They were paid views, so that's not always the best metric, but I think it was something in the 150,000 views across a couple different iterations of the video. It was shared a few different times. And then it had a really good engagement rate. That's really the critical thing that we were looking at. And it had 2 times the share rate of all the other videos that we did. So that's just an example of a piece of content that follows that structure, that has a underlying good story and gets people's attention. So yeah, I think at this point, I'm at the end of the time where I was supposed to talk, and now we're going to go to some questions. I don't know if I am supposed to just read these questions off here, or if Andy is coming back. Andy is coming back.
I am back.
Hello.
Thank you very much, Mark, for sharing that. And I know you've shared some of the theory. And so I'm sure there's someone who's watching or who may be watching down the road, and they're saying, well, right now I have an iPhone and or a Samsung or what have you. And then you're thinking, I want to shoot that. And you had mentioned about audio, right?
Yes.
The importance of audio. That's something that isn't very important.
Yep.
With an iPhone, someone's just getting started. What can they do with their phone, and how do they improve their audio?
Absolutely. So first of all, TikTok is all about phones. The majority, almost every single video on TikTok is shot with the phone. iPhone, Android, doesn't matter. As long as you have the phone within the, let's see if I can get it, within this sort of length, you're going to get great audio. As long as you're using a phone made within the last 3 to 4 years, you won't have to worry about audio at all. It's only if you start getting into DSLR or some kind of other mirrorless camera or some other function or some other camera like that you want to start worrying about some other things. At which point you can get something like a Rode VideoMic Pro. You can also get a lapel mic. I personally have what's called a Sanken CS2. It's a boom mic, but it's a lot more technical. Once you start getting up into the technical realm, then things get a lot more expensive. But for starting out, a phone is all you need, and you got it. And TikTok, if you do that, you can even edit the video straight on the app. You don't even need an editing platform.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Here's a question that's come in. What are some common rookie mistakes that you see when shooting video, and how do you fix that?
Yeah, so many. So if we're talking about a little bit more production value, overusing drones and gimbals. I actually don't even own a gimbal. I shoot a lot of handheld, a lot of tripod, and you can make that look incredible. You don't need all the latest tools. Other common mistakes are putting too much wobble. Like if you're filming on a DSLR, for instance, oftentimes people hold it out here like this, and you put a lot of micro shakes or jitters in it. That can look really bad. A simple way to fix that is hug it up next to your body and let you have more support there. You can also put the strap around your neck and push it out from you so you have 3 points of contact. Other rookie mistakes, honestly, the biggest rookie mistakes I tend to see is not titling things well or not having clear story direction. Those are honestly the 2 biggest mistakes that I see. And then also repurposing content in a not so great way. So just dumping content from one thing on another. Like I see this especially happening with Vimeo. A lot of people will just dump content on there that really isn't made for that application. So really understanding which application is the best to put it on is ideal.
Excellent. Thank you. And I know that you hear a lot of messages about the importance of closed captioning.
Yes.
And And so I'd like to hear some of your thoughts on that. And also, is there an app or program that actually generates closed captioning for content for TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, etc.?
So TikTok, I don't know of one, but pretty much everything else, rev.com, rev.com. You just simply upload your videos. You can either do them a cheaper way that is just by computers, AI, or you can have somebody actually do it, but it's still dirt cheap. I think it's under $5 to $10 for any video you might do. The other thing that you can do is simply upload it to Facebook. Facebook's a little bit more tricky, but if you upload it to YouTube, they have a feature in there where it automatically generates closed captioning, and then you can go in there and edit the text. And then you can download that as an SRT file. TikTok, it's a little bit more tricky on there. What I'd recommend is just typing it onto the screen. That's typically what most people do. I haven't seen a dedicated application for that yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if they come out with that pretty soon. So, but yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I know that when you were actually sharing your screen and the video, I know that I know for me, it was very interesting and intriguing to see you actually walking through the thought process.
Yep.
Would it be possible that you could maybe do that for another example or two?
Sure.
It could be even a different platform, but I think that'd be helpful for people to really get a tangible way of understanding your mindset and the thought process.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see which one I want to do. Because the other one that I would immediately play is a little bit more advertising based. Let's see here. What do I have on my desktop?
And even that could work.
Okay, I'll do an advertising one. Let's do this from the Taste. Yeah, let's do Taste. So this was another ad that I actually referenced in the while I was talking. So now this is a pre-release ad, and I don't think this is even the final version, but you'll get the idea. Everybody can see it all right?
Yep.
Okay, let's go ahead and play that.
I was really frustrated when I was on my search for plant-based protein because I felt that something so delicious like fruit or plant-based foods, like why was the protein powder tasting so bad? It would leave like a gross aftertaste. The texture was horrible. Most of the time it tasted like cardboard. I wanted to do better for myself, for the planet, and I was having a difficult time getting there. So I was super excited to find Planet Protein. Not only does it taste delicious and leaves me wanting more, I don't have that horrible aftertaste like I did with all the other protein powders that I tried. Planet Protein is environmentally conscious in the way that it uses 8 simple, clean ingredients. They don't use that plastic tub. Instead, they use a recyclable bag. It comes with a wooden scoop. You can't get better than that. And this is why I love it.
So yeah, this was actually definitely a couple versions ago. I forgot to balance the soundtrack in there, so the soundtrack was a little bit too loud. But you'll get the basic point. So at the beginning there, the first thing that she says is, basically she hits the problem immediately. In the first 5 seconds, she hits, I've been, wanting these, as I've been trying to find plant-based protein, they've all been nasty, right? So instantly, if you have that problem, if you've been doing that same thing and hitting that same problem, you're going to listen. And then she starts building that problem. It tastes like cardboard. It tastes like this. So I was really happy when I found Planet Protein. It doesn't have that aftertaste. Now she's proving it, right? She's saying it doesn't have that bad aftertaste. It's not really gritty and chalky. And it also has these other things. It's made from super simple ingredients, right? So now she's hitting other things that are apropos to the demographic, right? So she's saying it's only made with 8 simple organic ingredients. And then we show a shot specifically of those ingredients. So this is real food. It's all real, just food, right? And then it's not too long, but it gets right down to the point and then gives you a specific message to actually go and act on it. So that kind of structure, hitting that pain point, and you really want to hit that pain point in the first 5 seconds. So we do what's called a hook. So the hook is actually something that is made to specifically get your attention and keep watching it. And actually, this is the other really helpful thing to do. Do a lot of testing with your videos. So with that one, we actually made 4 videos that are virtually identical, but different hooks in slightly different angles. And when they're being run as ads, we're going to test them. Which one performs better? And the one that performs best is the one that will get boosted even more, right? So do a lot of testing. But does that kind of give you a good...
It does. And so let me ask you, I'm just going to throw this out. We didn't script this, but
Sure.
you're a church and your pastor is preaching powerful sermons and the 3 angels message, we want to get it out there.
Yep.
Now, you don't want to just put that sermon, the title, as you had mentioned, and the date of it and so forth. So what would be your approach to share that, to get viewers? Would you splice up the sermon, have a couple little phrases, and then say there's more at this link? I just want to see what your thought process would be to do that.
I love this question. So first of all, what I would do, a great person who has done this and is doing this phenomenally well is the podcaster Joe Rogan. All of his content is not great, but just a disclaimer, but he does this incredibly well. He does on average 2 to 4 hour podcasts of him just talking to somebody. And he has a dual upload strategy. So one, he'll upload the full length thing, and both on his podcast platforms and on YouTube. But the other thing that he'll do, and this is what's really critical, is he will take snippets. So and he's interviewing a lot of different people. So the first reason that people are going to click on this is the person. Next, it's the title. He will tease at something, and it's often very relevant or apropos to current issues. So when you see that title, you'll click on it because you're curious about what he's going to say. And then he includes the entire thought. So he goes from the beginning of the setup of that thought and then cuts it off after that thought has been sufficiently answered, right? So you're still using that same story structure. You're just taking those, if you will, scenes of the movie or bits of the sermon in this case and sticking it out there. So what I would do is I would live stream. You can live stream the whole thing, but when you're uploading it to YouTube, only do the sermon. And then with the sermon, make sure that you have really good titling like we talked about. Then start uploading those snippets in the range of 5 to 15 minutes, maybe 19 if it's really impactful. But put those and title those really well. And what will happen is that those other ones will bring people to watch the full length one more. But that gives you a little bit more structure than that. Does that kind of answer that?
It does. No, thank you very much. And we're running out of time, so I want to squeeze in one more question, maybe a 2-minute response. And that would be, a lot of our churches across the division, not just in this union, we're hosting events. It could be a supper club, it could be an evangelistic series, etc. And we want to utilize social media to actually draw them to it. So what would be kind of your thought process in creating a video, a short video, and let's say you're going to post it on Facebook. How are you going to, what's going through your head?
Yeah, so the first thing that I'm thinking is, what's the budget? Budget influences a lot of things. If you don't have a lot of budget, do this. You would be surprised at how effective those types of videos can be, just talking head straight to the camera. It's all down to the content. So the first thing I'm thinking is, what is the pain point? What is the pain point that we're trying to solve? And this goes actually before you even make the ad. When you're setting up the event, what pain point or what desire point are you doing in this, right? Once you've done that, then the ad comes easy. Hit the pain point, but do multiple versions. Hit one pain point and hit another pain point. You can often find that one converts a lot better than the other. Then the other is distribution. If you're just posting it, it's going to be a lot less effective than if you boost it. If you actually target a specific demographic, target their interests, target Adventists or whoever the demographic is who's going to benefit from this problem solve, target them specifically and in the demographic, and then split test it. Make sure you have at least 2 creatives that you can test, 2 separate videos that you can test across that. And then make it a really low friction. So like if they need to sign up for the event, just make it so that they can easily click that they're interested in the event.
Excellent. Hey, Mark, I just want to say thank you so much. I know I know I have more questions in my own mind, but it looks like time is wrapping up, and I want to thank you for sharing these wonderful tips. And I also want to thank everyone for tuning in. This is just the beginning of many more presentations in the weeks ahead. Please join us again next week for another Wednesday workshop on creating engaging newsletters. Super important. And I want you to have a great afternoon. Thank you, Mark, once again for sharing, and may God bless you.